So what's the parody intro song going to be this week? Because last week it was McDonald's.
Yeah.
This week.
Bonsai Theology. We got the doctrine. Oh.
I like that more. Is that Arby's?
Yeah.
Well, hello, everyone. Huh? It's been a very long year. We're recording this one earlier in the day, which apparently means we have more chaotic energy.
Yeah, I guess so. Uh-oh. That doesn't bode well.
Yeah, because the last one we recorded at like 9 at night?
9 p.m.
And then it is 2:45 p.m.
On a Tuesday.
In the afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made homemade coffee and Nathan got Starbucks.
Not Starbucks coffee, though. Starbucks hot chocolate. Peppermint hot chocolate.
So you paid the $8 surplus just for the chocolate? Not even the good stuff?
It is good.
All right.
And it was $5, thank you.
Oh, I stand correct. Well, anyways, thanks for joining us for episode 2 of Bonsai Theology. We're in the wisdom literature. Today, we are going to be going into like the actual first meat of the text. That's why you were doing Arby's, I see now. The first actual meat of the text. And we're going through Ecclesiastes 1 through 3 today. Yeah, and so this should be a good passage. Reading through the notes, I really like the direction that you took. And so, yeah, unless there's anything you want to say before we dive right into it, we can.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're not gonna hit every single section of chapters 1 through 3, just certain sections. So if you're confused as to why we skipped over a passage, it's because we don't like it.
Oh,
just kidding. We went a different direction, and we're hopefully there's kind of a flowing thought, a unified line of thinking here. But yeah, that all that to say, we're not going to hit every single scripture line in chapters 1 through 3, but hopefully we get the main idea of 1 through 3.
Absolutely. And a point that we hit on in the first episode was that we're not experts. We're not trying to say we're experts. We're students. And this is just another facet for us to learn and explore and write out what we're learning. So we're not experts, and we're not trying to say that we're experts, but this is something that we both are passionate about, interpreting the Bible. And so, yeah, this is us interpreting Scripture. And if you have any alternative views or comments about what we've said, or resources to help us further our studies, please let us know. Yeah, we actually do own bonsaitheology.com now. And so you can email us at contact@bonsaitheology.com.
Woo!
Yeah. And we'll both see those messages, and we'll figure out how to respond from there.
Yeah.
Just send us the messages. Please. We're lonely.
We are. Well, I mean, I'm not. I have Fern and a wife.
Oh, yeah, I do have a cat.
Yeah.
Who ran off.
I'm lonely right now, though. I'm the only one here, I guess, besides Fern.
Wow.
All right.
Anyways, okay. Now we've got all the semantics out of the way.
Yeah. So before we get into, I guess, the actual, as you put it, meat of Ecclesiastes, before we get into chapter 1, I thought a good way to kind of preface what we're going to talk about, or preface maybe just this series in general on Ecclesiastes, as a reference to Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, when Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened." And I think this reference to Matthew is such a good way to start the episode, because I've heard it said that Ecclesiastes is a Torah for the 21st century. And in that, It means that Ecclesiastes is written for those who have grown tired or grown weary of a type of, I guess you could say, like fantastical or like otherworldly theology. And so this book offers guidance in how to live in the here and now and in the present day moment. And so what I think is so cool and so beautiful about Ecclesiastes is that Kohelet, he's not interested in the afterlife. He's not interested in how to escape death. But he's interested in how to live well in the midst of just the raw impermanence of this life. And so for those who have grown tired of trying to find meaning, or maybe even grown tired of trying to force meaning into the life that they're living, Ecclesiastes offers nourishment to that. So at the risk of sounding, as I said to you in a kind of a jokingly manner, at the risk of sounding heretical with how I'm using the Matthew reference, it's almost as if Kohelet is saying to his audience, I see you, I see your burden, and I see your exhaustion. I'm aware of your fear of life's meaningless, so come, gather around, and listen to these words of wisdom. And so Ecclesiastes, I think, is a book for the weary, a book for the heavy laden, and for those who are just unsure of how to live in a world of uncertainty. And so kind of paradoxically, in his pessimism, Kohelet offers just, I think, a lot of hope in that.
Yeah, and that's big. I really love that idea of it being like the Torah of the 21st century. One of the comments that the pastor at my church that I work with says, and he's also a mentor of the show, so hey, quite often is that like Generation Z, which we're both in, 98 babies, yeah. Right, you're 98? Mm-hmm. Yeah, April 1st, that's right.
Yeah.
That Gen Z is like very not critical, but discerning of everything that's going on around them. And so instead of being anti everything, they just want to know why everything is the way that it is. And I love how you put it, that it's for those who have grown tired, grown weary of that fantastical, like over the top faith that in my experience, like a lot of why I have dove into scripture so much was because I had this faith that didn't allow science or anything real involved unless it was called Christian. And like the Kohelet seems to like blatantly take that and say, no, that's not what I want. That's not what I'm going for. Yeah.
I like it because it's almost as if Ecclesiastes is giving permission to ask questions. And I think that's something that has been lost. I think a lot of Christians view questioning as a lack of faith, and they're kind of ostracized for that. But Kohelet is saying, no, it's important. And in fact, you have to ask questions about your faith. You have to ask questions about your about life. Otherwise, it's going to build up and you're just going to become just too burnt out to even live. Yeah. And so I just really love just that permission of asking questions.
Yeah, I would not be able to tell you who said it first if I tried. It has been attributed to so many people, but there's a quote that that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Certainty is. And so questioning your faith, if done right, is something that's going to build your faith. But when you're not questioning anything, when you're just so certain in how everything is, it is such a brittle faith that's the kind of faith that falls apart fast, Yeah. So I think this is a beautiful book and a beautiful way of looking at that.
Yeah. And just a quick side tangent, we're not sponsored by this person or anything, but if you're interested in talking about certainty and all that stuff, there's a scholar by the name of Peter Enns who wrote a book called The Sin of Certainty, and it's a really good read. So all right, so I guess now keeping that in the back of our minds, kind of using that as just kind of a foundation, where we might not go into that ideology super heavily. I think it's just kind of an underlying theme throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, and it'll come up every now and then. So let's just keep that in the back of our minds as we go through. I think that would be good. So starting off in chapter 1, I'm going to look at the chunk of scripture, chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. And so first we come to, obviously, chapter 1, verse 1, and it says, the words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And now this is known, or this is called what's known as a superscription. And it's kind of like an opening line to prepare the readers for what's to follow in the content. And it kind of acts like what would today be called like the title page, and helps to identify like the genre, the author, the subject matter, sometimes even the date. But here in this superscription, we do get the genre, which is just the words, that would be the genre. And then we do get the author, or so that would be the teacher or Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. We don't get the subject matter in that superscription or the date. But typically that's what you'd find in those. And you get a lot of that like in Paul's letters and all that stuff, that superscription. And typically these superscriptions do appear at the beginning of biblical books, mostly the prophetic books, but we do find them here and the wisdom literature. And I think maybe a cool side note is that in wisdom and prophetic literature, superscriptions are typically read as being added by a second hand. And so this would be like an editor who came on at a later time than the original author, or in this case, the original speaker.
Man, and they couldn't have just straight up said, "This is not Solomon." That would have been too easy for future historians.
Yeah. But and actually, there was a name given to this second hand or this editor. He's commonly referred to as the frame narrator or narrator, just because he frames Kohelet's speech. We find him here at the beginning of chapter 1, and we find him here at the end of chapter 12. So he kind of just frames Kohelet's his talk. And kind of his purpose is to set the mood of Kohelet and to kind of introduce his speech. And once again, just prepare the reader for what's to come. And so this frame narrator, we find his hand in verses 1 through 11 of chapter 1. And in those passages, he sets forth the themes of Kohelet, common themes that we're going to find throughout the rest of Ecclesiastes. And so we kind of mentioned, or kind of in passing, or maybe briefly in the first episode, but the first major theme that this frame narrator sets forth is going to be the theme of Hevel. And we talked about it meaning, breath, vapor, mirage. I've even seen it mean something such as emptying. And so there's the whole idea that life is emptying. Like the moment that we are born, we are headed to death. And so it's just a constant state of emptying. And then the things that we grasp after are empty. The things that we grasp after are mirages and just mere breath. And so there's no substance to the pursuits or to what we're trying to grasp after. So that's going to be one of the first major themes of Kohelet.
Yeah, one of the things that I was reading is that Kohelet was referencing almost the daily traditions that we go through. We wake up, we go brush our teeth, we make breakfast, we drink our coffee, then we go to work, and then we go to lunch, and it's just a repeated thing. And at the end of the day, you're just going back to sleep to restart everything again. And when that's all the substance of your life, it is so fleeting and purposeless. Yeah. And so it's that idea of everything that is just that constant repetition is that Hevel, that fleeting vapor. Yeah, I like that. But yeah, so that's going to be the first major theme is Hevel. A second major theme is going to be the theme of under the sun. And the most popular interpretation of that would just be under the sun as referring to just like the world as it is, so to speak, or like the universal experience of human existence. And so under the sun would entail like hard work, despair, depression, injustice, just everything people can experience on earth. That can be what's entailed with the theme of under the sun.
But as mentioned before in our previous episode, I talked about how this theme of under the sun can be a cipher for Ptolemaic rule over Judea. And I'm going to write a blog post about that and go a little more in depth there. But kind of just the high notes here is that the sun is going to be a metonym for Egypt, just because the sun would have been like the most prominent deity and representative of Egypt. And then it could also refer to the Ptolemaic king, whose throne names would have included something like son of the sun, so like S-U-N, son of the S-O-N, son of the S-U-N, son. And so by and large, you'll find the interpretation of it as just referring to just the universal experience of humanity. But I also like to put forth or follow the interpretation of it being a cipher for Ptolemaic rule over Judea, which I think can greatly influence how one even reads the book of Ecclesiastes, which is something I can go more into in the blog post there. So that's going to be, Hevel, under the sun. Oh, we're going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so Hevel, under the sun. The third one we're going to find is the word yitron, which can be translated as profit or benefit or return, gain, compensation. And so that's going to be a big buzzword of the time. We find that the Israelites were surrounded by these different narratives that offered profit and that offered success. And so material gain and happiness kind of dominated just the cultural thinking of the time. And we find that this word yitron kind of epitomized the aspirations of those whose desire it was to adopt outside cultural values. And that's where a lot of the Ptolemaic rule comes into play, of the Israelites wanting to essentially Hellenization. That's the whole concept of that, of making things fit under the Greek culture. And so there was this belief that all of this material success was like a natural reward for hard work, and it just completely negated the need for God. And so that's going to be a buzzword and a pretty big theme throughout Ecclesiastes, is just yitron, or profit or success. So yeah, we have Hevel, under the sun, yitron, and then I think a last big theme would be the cyclical nature of creation, and kind of what you were talking about. Yeah. But just
I forgot that was even in the notes, so I'm sorry. I beat you to the punch.
That's okay. Yeah, it is. It's a big theme, and just like we see the description of the sun's movement, and that's kind of meant to depict just the constancy of the earth. Like the earth is just in a constant state of this cycle, and so there's just nothing reliable like that of the sun, which will always be in the same spot day after day. It's a cycle, and it's representative of life's sustaining quality of the constant, so to speak. And then in verse 8, in some translations, all things are wearisome. That's my translation, the NRSV. I think that can be better rendered as all things are constantly active. And so just this whole theme of life being cyclical, that's going to come into play as we read Ecclesiastes as well.
Yeah, it's almost a cynical look of gravity, like you can throw something up and it will always come down, but that doesn't mean it's going to go back up.
Yeah.
And everything is going to likely repeat, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to be a good repetition. And then one day it's just going to stop.
Yeah.
And not have a chance to repeat.
Yeah. So those are going to be the major themes that are kind of laid forth by the Frame Narrator. He's just saying, this is what's going to come next, right? These are the things you're going to find in the speech of Kohelet. And so that's this kind of 1 through 11 of chapter 1 is just setting the mood of what's to come, which I'm appreciative of. I think it kind of acts as a synopsis and just a really good, succinct description of Kohelet's kind of his exploits, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. And then, so moving on, I want to bring us to, I guess, what can be called one of Kohelet's case studies. And I'm looking here at chapter 1, verse 12. And then this case study goes through chapter 2, verse 26. And so we find that on this case study, starting in chapter 12, I, the teacher, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. And so Kohelet embarks on this case study as King Solomon to test whether Yitron, the success or profit, can actually be obtained through kind of just unhinged satisfaction of the human desire. And I know we kind of talked about it in the previous episode of how it's important to not completely disregard King Solomon and not just kick him out of the picture completely when it comes to Ecclesiastes. And I think this is one of the moments when we do need to recognize the importance of King Solomon in Ecclesiastes, because if King Solomon, who has just access to unlimited wealth and unlimited wisdom, if he is unable to find happiness and success through material gain, which is what Kohelet's trying to do through the Solomon figure, then nobody can. And so we find that Kohelet's going to, as King Solomon, just look for meaning through pleasure, through wisdom, through folly, and through his work. And so that's kind of what this case study is going to take us through. But I think just a fun little side note that kind of just talks about also how in-depth biblical scholarship can go and how it can be really easy for arguments to take place.
Never.
Yeah.
It's never been a thing.
Yeah. But when it says, I, the teacher, when king, so that when king, other translations say was king, other translations say have been king, we find that it's all past tense translations. And so this has caused a lot of inquiry and confusion among scholars, and there's been much debate as to why this is the case, because you would think that if it's Solomon talking, you would say he is king or he's currently the king. You wouldn't talk about yourself in the past tense, because a lot of kings, they typically didn't take the time to look at their career after they retired, so to speak. And so there's a lot of debate as to why this is the case. And so one answer to this, and this is rabbinic tradition, posits that Solomon was seduced from the throne by a demon named Ashmodai, rendering him no longer the king. And so that would force Solomon to say he was the king, as in past tense, and no longer the king.
So you're telling me that he was possessed by the lizard?
Exactly. Rabbinic tradition seems to think so.
Yeah.
And then another one, a less exciting way to view it, is just that some view this grammar as a sign of royal fiction, kind of just outline the genre of this case study. And then recent scholarship views it as like a has been and still is king. But all that to say, nonetheless, Kohelet is adopting the character of Solomon, who at one point was king over Israel. But that's just a side fun tangent to show you just how in-depth people really take these things.
Yeah, and actually kind of fascinating. I've got Robert Alter's commentary in front of me, his translation. And something that he translated that to was, for what is the man who comes after the king, for which he has already done. Mm-hmm. And like, that's another like additional translation that's a lot different than the others.
Yeah, that's really cool. Also, I apologize if you hear any of the garden work going on outside of my window. It might be a little loud, but it is what it is.
Yeah, those plants are really loud in your background.
They are loud.
Can you just shush them? Oh, wow. Yeah, that fixed it. Those are some obedient plants you got there. For any of our like audio listeners, he's got plants in his background. They are plants. They don't make noise.
Thank you for saying that note. I appreciate that. That's really good.
You're welcome. I was just thinking, if I was listening to this podcast, I'd want to know that.
I would too. And if anyone's curious, there's just a door in Monty's background.
Well, in a bed.
In a bed.
In a laundry basket, which I'm trying to cover up.
Yeah.
I could have moved it out for him. I did that last week, but
So yes, Kohelet's going to take his I guess listeners on this journey, on this case study, as being Solomon trying to find success through just this unhinged pursuit of wisdom and material and all that stuff. And so moving then to chapter 2, because we kind of just covered the rest of chapter 1. Going to chapter 2, Solomon says, or Kohelet as Solomon says, I said to myself, and to myself can also be to my heart, come now, I will make a test of pleasure and enjoy yourself. And so we see that Kohelet is on this introspective journey here. He informs himself, or he informs his heart, that he's going to test its exposure to pleasurable experiences, and he's going to observe how it reacts to those experiences. And so he wants to see if increase in pleasure is increase in success or increase in happiness. And so we find in verses like 1 through 3 that Kohelet as Solomon indulges himself in plenty of laughter and pleasure and excessive drinking of wine, and it all just comes up short. It's all, once again, that chasing after the wind kind of ideology there. And I think kind of something cool to maybe pause and take a moment to talk about real fast is, especially living in the US, where capitalism is a very prominent ideology here. I think while this obviously wasn't an ideology of Kohelet's time, I think it can kind of act as a commentary on capitalism, because Kohelet is showing his audience the importance of emotional well-being over pleasure seeking. And he's showing that increase or like growing consumption doesn't necessarily lead to happiness or success like capitalism likes to tell people. And so it's better to focus on your emotions and on your well-being than to kill yourself trying to gain wealth and material items. So yeah, I think that's this cool little side note. Moving on to verses 4 through 10, the scene kind of shifts to the Solomonic figure participating in just this gross like self-gratification and self-indulgence. And the first person singular appears many times here, like the I, the me, the myself, and it's almost to the point to where it's obsessive. Like I said, it's just this gross self-indulgence and gross self-gratification. And so just so we can get kind of an idea of how many times this first person singular appears, I just want to go ahead and read through the passage of verses 4 through 10, just so we can hear it.
And I'm going to keep a count.
Yeah, because it is quite a lot, and we're using the count may vary. We're using the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version.
Yeah, and I'm just going to count off of what you say. So if you jump over any,
ooh, the pressure's on.
The pressure is on.
So if you wanted to flip with us, chapter 2, starting in verse 4, and then we're going to go through verse 10 and just look at the first person singular. And so he says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted them in all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and delights of the flesh and many concubines. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. So how many was that?
I may have missed some because I had to take off my socks and shoes and to pass that, but 23, I think.
Wow. Yeah. So just gross self gratification, just very much focused on the self here. And so he lists all these items that he's gathered for himself, and just to show how like his sole focus is just to increase his wealth in all areas of his life. And even like his gathering reaches beyond just like personal items, and it goes into architecture and landscaping, just to show that he is literally withholding nothing from himself. He is trying to do all that he can and acquire all that he can to see if that can amount to profit and to success and to happiness. And then even more, he groups these items with livestock and with humans, kind of hinting that he just views like the livestock and humans as just mere commodities to boost his ego. And so he also, not only just is he so blatantly focused on the self, that he also has a blatant disregard for anything except himself for the pursuit of happiness, because he just disregards the quality of life of anyone. And then even after that, this too he finds is all chasing after the wind. And I think that Kohelet kind of wants his audience to see the humor in this, because Kohelet's Solomonic figure is just so outrageously obsessed with the self. It's almost funny. And then it's also funny in like the dark and sad way, because it all amounts to nothing. So it's, yeah.
So a highly spiritual comparison, I say in all irony, but Bojack Horseman like almost seems to be a commentary on this. Yeah. And I know you said that you haven't watched Bojack Horseman, but to anyone that hasn't watched it, it's basically the journey of this washed up actor who still has all the money and fame from, you know, his glory days. And he's trying to regain that. And one of the things that he keeps on exploring is, so what is the point? What is the purpose? Do I actually love anyone? Am I actually loved by anyone? Mm-hmm. Or am I just a name that can be easily replaced? Mm-hmm. And so this idea of being so obsessed with self is an idea that they that they attack in that show. And like, it's something that we do see throughout Hollywood, or when you're talking about capitalism, like the people at the top of the pyramid, not comparing capitalism to a pyramid scheme, but, you know, the people who are at the top, you know, you tend to be viewed as some of the lonelier. And we see everyone like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates and everyone like that get to such a point of success that, like, it seems like everyone around them leaves. Mm-hmm. And like, I mean, this might be dating the podcast, but, you know, Bill Gates recently got divorced. Jeff Bezos is on who knows which wife, and those types of things. And there's a satisfaction that wealth and things aren't going to get you. And so if all you're pursuing is this capitalistic gain, then you're missing something. And there's a lot that you just will never gain.
Yeah, and so then the question that comes, you kind of, we're not going to answer it, but as you know, as Christians, or even as whoever's listening, as just religion in general, I guess, what then can we put our hope into is kind of an underlying question. If all this fails, what is there to, you know, to pursue hope into outside of just material gain? But yeah, so I think it's really good, or really just interesting to read. And I'm glad you brought up Bojack Horseman, because like you said, I haven't watched it. I've heard it's very philosophical, but also I've heard it's funny. And so it brings out...
And inappropriate. So I'm not recommending it to our audience. But
yeah, it brings out the humor and the absurd.
Yeah.
Which I think is something Kohelet is trying to do, just trying to bring out the humor or the satire and just pure absurdity.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of his case study there of just trying to self-indulge as the Solomonic figure, and it's all coming up to nothing. It's all chasing after the wind. It doesn't amount to anything for him. And then that leads us into chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, which is probably one of the most famous passages of Ecclesiastes, and some people might have had their first encounter actually with this passage through a band called The Byrds and their song Turn, Turn, Turn in the 1960s, but that is based off of this passage here.
Okay, and I'm sorry, this is a stupid comment, but why did every British invasion band go the and then a bug or a animal's name?
You're going to be mad at yourself. The Byrds were American.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sorry, the timing and the name, it's just very British Invasion. Like, I mean, I'm instantly going to the Turtles or the Beatles or the Bee Gees is not an animal or insect, but like those types of groups. It's like,
You were American as well. Come on, man.
That's why birds is misspelled, I guess. But this is turning into a political commentary. Anyways, there's a translation you enjoy.
Yes, there is a translation I enjoy of Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 by, I found this in a book by a rabbi named Rami Shapiro. And the way he translates this is, everything in this world has its moment, a season of ripening and falling away, moments of birthing and moments of dying, moments of planting and moments of reaping, moments of killing and moments of healing, moments of demolition and moments of building, moments of weeping and moments of laughing, moments of mourning and moments of dancing, moments of scattering stones and moments of gathering stones, moments of embracing and moments of distance, moments of seeking and moments of losing, moments of clinging and moments of releasing, moments of tearing and moments of mending, moments of silence and moments of talking, moments of loving, moments of hating, moments of warring, and moments of peacemaking. And so if you couldn't notice, the prominent word throughout that passage is stone. I'm kidding. It's moments.
You had me for a second there, and I hate that because I was like, I was looking at the words I thought were prominent, and anyways.
No, so the prominent word throughout this passage is going to be moment. And so after all of his exploits to find meaning and to find success, Kohelet says that life is just a series of moments, and that life is just constantly ebbing and flowing. And these moments are fluid and they flow into each other. And so birthing flows into dying, killing flows into healing, weeping flows into healing or laughing. And so Kohelet then is saying that the key to be content is to know what moment you're in. And so when it's time to laugh, then it's okay to laugh. And when it's time to weep, then it's okay to weep. And just overall, don't try to force meaning into your moment or try to change your moment, because that endeavor is simply chasing after the wind. Mm. And so all these moments occur, and so live within them when they come around. And I think when looking at these moments, Kohelet then comes to the conclusion that there is no meaning in life. So don't try to force meaning or success in your life, but rather life in and of itself is meaningful. And so experiencing these moments are what's meaningful. And the meaning is found in the ebbing and flowing of life. And I think what's kind of profound about Kohelet and like the cyclical nature of that theme is that even if you don't like what moment you're in, it's okay to relax, because the reliable sun is going to shine again and create a new moment for you.
Yeah, that's huge. One of the things that I loved when I was reading into this passage was Robert Alter. He's the commentaries that I like the most at the moment. But he was talking, he was talking about how in those moments, what men struggle with is that we can grasp the concepts, but we can't grasp anything more than the basics. You know, like, I mean, yeah, sure, we know that the nucleus is the powerhouse of the cell. No, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Ooh.
I'm the editor. I can fix that. You know, but we, no matter how deep into that stuff we get, like, we're still going to be able to know more than that. There's always going to be something that we don't understand in that. What he said specifically is that men can grasp the concept of eternity and maternity, but nothing more than the basics. You know, we're never going to be able to fully understand what was it that God was doing before? What is it that he will continue doing after? That's not something that we can know in our current state. And so, I mean, you know, they traced the entire creation up until like the first second or something like that.
Mhm.
And so if you go through the whole evolutionary cycle, they're able to go through all of that, but they still don't know what pushed everything into motion. And so there's always that one thing that we're never going to be able to grasp, no matter how much we know about it. And so it's meaningless to look for that because you'll never know. At the same time, there is so much depth and beauty in the search.
Yeah. I like to think of it as life in moments, or another big word within that passage is life as a season. And so seasons come and seasons change, but it's all cyclical. And so it's okay to relax in that cycle and just be okay with not, like you just say, not necessarily meaning in the pursuit of life or in the pursuit of trying to force meaning into that life or trying to gain all this material, but just having meaning in just living. Just living life is meaningful, and however you do it.
Yeah. And man, that is a hard thing. Talk about the pursuit of happiness, and the entire goal of humanity is to try to find meaning. Yeah. And that's why we keep on putting meaning in the meaningless and all those things. Yeah. But
actually, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was say Kohelet back in chapter 2 kind of gives a way to live a good life. It's going to be verse 24. And this is kind of how he frames what it is to live a good life. And he says, "There is nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil." And so as long as you are eating well and drinking well, drinking what you enjoy, eating what you enjoy, and you are working in something that's enjoyment to you, then that's all you need. You don't need anything else. And then later on in chapter 4, which we can get to, he talks about the importance of friendships. And that's another aspect to just the meaning of life, not necessarily all the material gain, but eating well, drinking well, enjoying your work, and having good friends.
Yeah. And this is such a powerful passage. I mean, I love the whole I love your translation that you referenced from Rabbi Shapiro. Because growing up, I had always thought of this passage as a permission. Yeah, there's a time that you're going to have to murder someone. That's okay. There's a time that you're going to have to be born. That's okay. See the comparison. But, it's not saying that there's permission for that. It's saying that is something that happens. Yeah. That is something that is a part of life, no matter how much we run from it. And that is powerful.
Yeah, that's what I had for this episode. If you had anything else to say, please do. Other than that, that was the end of my exploits in chapters 1 through 3.
I thought that was really good. I love your notes on that. And yeah, I think the one note that I do have, before we started the recording of everything, I went through and read through Ecclesiastes for it all, and 14 is the one that I had highlighted. 2:14. There's a lot of 14s in this. The wise have eyes in their head, but the fools walk in darkness. Yet I perceive that the same fate befalls all of them. You got to have more than just the pursuit, I guess. That's kind of what we've been saying a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's a good word.
And so basically, downfall to capitalism, all hail the Lizard King Solomon. And we will see you guys next time.
Absolutely.
And to be clear, that was a joke.
Are you sure?
Fairly.